Hello everybody. So I'm just going to quickly go over some of the sort of procedural changes as well as cover the draft board in general. This will hopefully be a bit more structured than the last one because the last one I kind of just made it in the middle of my final exam period. This time I've had time to actually sit down and prep a little bit, but I am a notorious rambler, so it'll probably still be a mess. The first thing I'm going to cover is the bans. As you can see, I've decided that the only mega that is banned will be Mega Floette. And my reasoning for this is I asked people who signed up to give opinions on what they think should be banned. There was not really any majorities outside of Floette, which I had already decided would be banned. The two that had the most amount of votes were Mega Charizard Y and Mega Gengar. And my reasoning for Mega Charizard not being banned is I think it's a lot easier to deal with Sun in a draft setting because you can prepare with things like manual weather. And then my reasoning for Gengar not being banned is I'm sure there's some people that want to try out Perish in draft, so I don't think Gengar is such a problem that Perish will dominate unless the person with Mega Gengar is a good Perish player. And also, just don't let the Mega Gengar player get all of the Perish pieces. So be vigilant in your drafting, and I think it'll be fine. If I end up being wrong, that's my bad. But I don't think it'll be too problematic. I guess we'll see. The next thing is Species Clause. This is a VGC draft, so there are Species Clause in place. And just to give some examples of the different cases that could come up, if your Mega is Abomasnow, for example, you are not allowed to draft the base Abomasnow as well, because they're considered two separate Pokemon for the case of this draft. Additionally, you would not be allowed to draft something like the male Basculegion and the female Basculegion because they're the same Pokemon despite having different spots in the draft. Same thing with something like Hisui and Arcanine and the base form Arcanine, as well as two separate Rotom forms. If they have the same name but they're split on the board, you can't draft two things with the same name. I think that's kind of the easiest all-encompassing way to explain it. The one exception to this is Gourgeist. So Gourgeist has different stats. There are 4 different forms of Gourgeist. They all have different stats. I felt like having 4 different draftable Gourgeists was too many. I think 4 out of 16 is just too big of a grouping. I think 4 teams with the same Pokemon that essentially do the same thing is kind of boring. So what I've done is I've grouped them into what I've called the fast Gourgeists and the fat Gourgeists. And the easiest way for me to explain these differences are the 2 faster speed Gourgeists are the fast, and the 2 slower are the fat. So if you draft a Gourgeist, you will either be drafting the 2 fat ones, which are the super and the large, or you'll be drafting the 2 fast ones, which are the average size and the small. And it is very important that you keep this in mind. So if you draft Gourgeist, you have to know what sizes you have access to, because they are different. But yeah, I think that's it in terms of kind of the niche cases for things like Species Clause. I guess also, just to cover it, like, even though you're unable to draft 2 Megas in the first place, and we'll get to that in a minute, like, you could not draft both Mega Charizards, right? And I think Meowstic is the only other case here, where there's sort of 2 Megas that are based on the same base form. So yeah, you could not draft both Megas. I I think that's it in terms of things like species clause. The next thing I want to cover is like images. So you can see that like some of the images for Gorgeist and also Mr. Rhyme are missing. That's just an issue with the doc. They're still draftable. I just wanted to sort of get ahead of things there in case anybody had questions about that. Additionally, some of the forms are not specified. So like here you can see this is Lycanroc midday, but the way it's recorded in the doc is just as Lycanroc. Use the image as your guide in that case. The image, I double checked everything. The image for every Pokemon should be accurate to what it actually is. So if you're unsure of what form exactly it is that you might be drafting, first of all, just look it up. But also, the image should be correct. Next, I want to talk about Floette. So, like I said, Mega Floette is banned, but the base form of Floette is not. And that kind of leads me into the rules on how Mega Evolution is going to work in this draft. So, the Mega tier, all of these Pokemon here, will go into a before main draft auction phase, and I will go into detail more on that in a minute. But every Pokemon in the Mega tier, the only item they are allowed to hold is their respective Megastone. So Abomasnow, as my Mega, must hold the Abomasnowite. That doesn't mean it's required to Mega Evolve in the game. My main example for this is Garchomp, because Garchomp is kind of infamous for being worse as a Mega than as its base form. You could draft Mega Garchomp and just never Mega Evolve it, but it is required to hold the Garchompite for every game. In the same vein, if I drafted regular Garchomp, it can never hold the Garchompite. That should be relatively self-explanatory. If there's any questions about that, let me know, but hopefully the way I explained it is straightforward enough. It can hold any item it wants except for the Megastone. Cool. Next, I'm going to talk about some of the procedural changes. So, we ended up shifting the requirements for tiers. Originally, we had it as you would draft 2 D tiers and 1 B tier, but we've changed it so that now you'll draft 2 B tiers and just 1 D tier. And the reason for this is there are just more Pokemon in B tier than there are in D tier. And also, it just kind of like generally boosts the power level of every team, and I think that's more interesting as a whole. So, I'm assuming nobody has made plans already because you haven't seen the board up until this point. But if you had been making plans based on what you thought the board would look like, I apologize, but you'll have to change them. The free picks in the Mega will still work in the same way. But yeah, we've just shifted it, so now you'll be drafting 2 B tiers instead of 2 D tiers. To sort of talk more about the free picks, I've put the costs per tier up here so that you'll be able to remember. And also remember that you're required to draft 3, exactly 3. So it was very intentionally done that when you draft your Mega, you're only able to afford up to 1 S tier. Because you have to get 3 Pokemon. Right. Now we can talk about the Mega Auction, because that has also, my plans for that has also changed. Initially, the way that I was thinking of doing it was it would be kind of like the traditional auction, where people in real time are upping their bid on a particular Pokemon. But what I think I'm going to do instead is the Pokemon will go on auction. So for example, the first player, whoever Coach 1 happens to be, will propose a Mega to be auctioned on. And let's just say, for ease, they pick Mega Charizard Y. What will happen is, every coach that has the ability to draft a Mega, so basically any coach that has not already obtained their Mega, will DM me a value of points between a minimum of 5 and a maximum of 27. And after 3 hours from the initial proposal, I will take the highest bid, and that person will get the mega. If there's a tie, what I'll most likely do is just flip a coin, because I really don't know any better ways to differentiate this. My only other idea was have it just be based on when the number was sent, so whoever sent it sooner would get it. But there's a little bit of unfairness for people who have jobs or are working or in different time zones, things like that. So I don't love that idea as much. I am open to hearing opinions about what method you guys would like for tiebreakers, but that's my current thinking. But yeah, so whoever has the highest point bid will receive that mega for that cost. So say that they decide to spend 15 points for Mega Charizard Y, that ends up being the highest number. They would get Mega Charizard Y, it would cost them 15 points, and then they would have 15 points remaining for their free picks. My hope in balancing this in a way is the first players that get to choose what megas to propose are given more options, but the megas will overall cost probably more because there's just greater competition. And then on the other end, for example, the last person to get their mega, they're guaranteed to only have to spend 5 points on their mega because there'll be no competition, but they just have less options overall. So hopefully that's balanced in some aspects. It's pretty tricky to balance something like this just because the megas are very disproportional in how strong they are, but this was kind of the best idea I could come up with, and we're just going to have to see how it goes. The next thing to talk about with the megas is a rebate cost, and what that means is if you draft a mega and you play it for a couple weeks and realize that you hate it, you can essentially return your mega to the draft pool, and you'll receive a set amount of points based on what your mega is. And it will not be the same as what you paid for it. So this is important to keep in mind. I will not be releasing the rebate costs to the public because I don't want people to be able to sort of gamify things where they intentionally draft a bad mega for cheap and then are able to get more points than they drafted it for intentionally. If that happens, then good for you. But I don't want people to know what that cost is so they can game the system in a way. But just know that all of the values have already been determined. So if you draft a mega, you end up not liking it and you want to return it, you can get a certain amount of points for it, and then you're required to get a new mega. But if you draft a cheaper mega, for example, then you can also drop one of your other Pokemon and pick up something more expensive in the free picks, just to give an example. I think that covers everything with the mega auction. Again, if there's any questions about all this stuff, because I know it's a little tricky to follow just hearing it kind of verbally, but if there's any questions, reach out to me, reach out to Jasmine, we're happy to answer. Next, I want to talk about dock automation. Anybody who played last season, you know there was a lot of automation on that dock in terms of submitting your results and stuff like that. This season, we have next to zero automation. I made this dock by hand. So a lot of stuff will be manually entered, which is convenient for you guys because there's less things that you have to think about. But for the staff's perspective, there's a lot more that we have to deal with. So if there's any mistakes, please don't get too mad at us. Just let us know and we can fix it. But that being said, there are some things that you guys will have to keep track of, and that is submitting your open team sheets for every week. I'm requiring that you submit open team sheets, but replays will not be collected this season. And then additionally, you need to keep track of what Pokemon are getting KOs, what Pokemon are getting KO'd, and all that things, because differential will be the tiebreaker for points. So the way that the playoffs will be determined is your win-loss record, then your point total, which means if you 2-0 somebody, you'll get 3 points for your win. If you 2-1 somebody, you'll get 2 points, and if you lose 1-2, you'll get 1 point. And then if you lose 2-0, you'll get 0 points. So your win-loss record first, then your point total, and then if the win-loss and point total are tied, then it will go to differential. So it is very important that you're tracking your own differential. For Showdown, for the Showdown division, this will be easy because you can just rewatch the replays. But for the cartridge division, it's very important that you're keeping track of these things in real time or having someone record it to be able to go back and watch it later. Because Pokemon Champions is a bad game, and they didn't give us replay codes. So make sure that you're keeping track of these things. That is my one sort of player-dependent ask in terms of the games. But essentially, the way that this will look, this will be updated by staff, is everybody will, play their sets. The result of the games will go there. The differential will go here. And then the open team sheet will be put in these spots. Again, I think that's generally self-explanatory, but if there's any questions, we're happy to answer. And I think that's about it in terms of what we need to cover. I've been working very hard on this. Jasmine has also been working very hard, and I would also like to say thank you to my draft consultants, Kelly and Luminex, for helping determine what Pokemon go in what tiers. We did the best we could because, like I said, this format is very unbalanced. But yeah, so I hope you guys will all have fun. And that's about it. Oh, actually, one more thing. So this order, in terms of the schedule, this is going to stay the same, but the draft order will not be the same. Right? So this is to prevent things like counter teaming. So the draft order will not line up with these numbers, meaning whoever drafts first is not guaranteed to be number 1 on this schedule. I want to make that clear now. And that is going to be true for all of these numbers, right? So the person who's drafting first is not guaranteed to be number 1. The person who drafts next is not guaranteed to be number 2, etc. But I think with that, that is the last thing that I had to say. So, again, thank you for watching. I hope you guys are all excited. I know I'm excited. And good luck. I'm excited to see how many people get sniped. And I'm also excited to see how the auction is going to go. But yeah, thank you guys.